Welcome to Shardcast, the Brandon Sanderson podcast. We are a bunch of mega fans giving you the news, discussion, and of course, a whole lot of opinions of Brandon Sanderson's works and the Cosmere. I am Danielle, and with me is Marvin.
Hi, I'm Paleo.
Hi, nice to see you again. And then we also have Joshua.
Hi, I am jofwu on various places online.
Various places. And we also have Jessie.
Hello, I am Lady Lameness, and it is nice to join you guys on the Lost Reviews. I think it would
Yes.
be.
Oh, yes, the Lost Reviews. Very happy to have you. And lastly, we also have Veronica.
Hello, I am Cheyenne Sedai, and yes, it's definitely really nice to join you guys on Lost Reviews.
on Lost Review. Okay, it's official. This is the Lost Reviews. I am FelCandy, and today we are doing, obviously, our Lost Metal Reactions episode. This is number 2. And Marvin and I wanted to be on the same one together as kind of a sequel to the Lost Preview. So if you have watched our Lost Previews videos, please sound off in our comments.
Yes, please. And we won't be doing like individual videos like we did for Rhythm of War, probably. So this will be like our way of giving you some Lost reviews. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're very, very excited to be here. So this episode will obviously have spoilers for The Lost Metal. In our first section, we're going to just discuss some slightly non-spoilery reactions to The Lost Metal. And then later on, I'll mention when we move on to our spoiler section, we will have Lost Metal full spoilers and Cosmere spoilers for sure. Let's see what Jessie has brought us for show and tell.
Okay, class. So I wanted to show you guys this. This is Carl. Carl is an octopus that I made initially for my brother and then gave it to Eric. So Eric gave me this morning and said I should show Carl off on show and tell. And he's super cute and really easy to make and very big. And making this was actually a disaster because I couldn't see any of the stitches with the type of yarn that I was using. So it kind of sucked, but it wasn't too bad. Yeah, so
It's really adorable.
yeah. I just wanted to say I have like 2 computers going on my lap and next to me, so if I'm not looking at the screen, I am paying attention. I also just wanted to mention that I have like 2 laptop things going at the moment because I'm not at a computer. So if I'm not looking at the screen, it's not that I'm not paying attention; it's that I'm going through my notes.
Okay, sure. Okay.
Like people have made comments about me not looking at the screen before. I'm like, guys, I'm looking at my notes. I'm paying attention.
terrible.
I promise. So
Yeah, that's
I
a
get
good
that.
point to mention. I always put my notes up at the top of my screen, like right below my camera, so it hopefully doesn't look that bad, like I'm looking away.
yeah,
All right, so we're going to dig in now. We're going to go into our spoiler-free, just general thoughts of what we felt when we were reading The Lost Metal. I'll start with Marvin.
Okay, yeah, so I really enjoyed the book. I don't think that was a surprise to anyone who followed the Lost Previews. Like, I already enjoyed all of that a lot. But I do think there definitely are some issues, especially like with the endings to some of the plot lines and the overall, some overall plot elements that will definitely go into later. So I wouldn't put it as my favorite book of Era 2, or like favorite book in general, but it's better than Ella of Law, at any rate, I would put it, but still worse in my mind than Shadows of Self or The Bands of Mourning. So yeah, it's I do think it was a good ending to the series as such, or to the era, but I have some issues with some things. Like, I still enjoyed it and everything. Like I said, it was a really good book, and it's a brand book, so of course I'm going to enjoy it. But I did have some issues, and yeah.
Yeah, we'll definitely be going into some thoughts about that. All right, thank you so much for that. Joshua, what do you think?
Yeah, so my opinions about this book were really mixed in the sense that they were all kind of all over the place. I think that this book had the highest highs in Era 2 for me, or at least many of them. But it also kind of at its worst was just sort of more average than the others. It was less consistent to me than the other Era 2 books. Overall, I really enjoyed it. It might be my favorite Era 2 book. It's just really difficult to rate it when it's like when the range of opinions are so varied compared to the others. And obviously it's so recent. So it's always hard to rate something when it's recent, but I really liked it. I've got a few complaints. I've got a few things that I can gush about. So that's where I'm at.
Great. Jessie, what do you think about this book?
Okay, so I didn't
Gather your
dislike the book. This isn't another Cytonic situation. I did like the book. I think most of what I'm ever going to say about this book is going to be complaints. There was just a lot in the book that I didn't like, even though there were things that I did like. And there are just some things about the way this book fits in the series and the overall structure of everything that kind of made me dislike it from the get-go. And that really kind of colored the rest of my experience as well, because I just felt disappointed because of a couple of things. So I did like the book. I'm going to complain a lot about it.
All right. Well, that's okay. You're allowed to do that. Let's see. Let's go on to Veronica.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Joff that this book has some of the highest highs in Era 2, and possibly the Cosmere in general. We'll get into that. But also, I have some problems like on a story level, on kind of the same things Zarek mentioned in his review, where there was one plot line that was very, very exciting, and then the other ones had a little bit of like spinning wheels. And it's not that I didn't enjoy them, it's just I always wanted to get back to that one plot line. And so there are a couple of small complaints like that, but I really still enjoyed the book. In large part thanks to like all those really high highs and the Cosmere elements. And I think there were some character arcs that I really enjoyed in this book as well. But I do have some problems with it. And I don't like to rate things until I reread them at least once. But it's possibly second or third in Era 2. I haven't been able to decide. I need a reread, having processed everything.
Yes, absolutely. I'm the same way. I kind of always need to look back on it later on after I've slept on it for a few months. But I personally just loved the book. I just ate it up. It was amazing. I really liked it as an ending to this mid-series storyline. I felt like it was a great bridge from going from obviously fantasy setting in Mistborn Era 1. And we have Mistborn Era 2 that's like this urban fantasy, like steampunk Western. But in The Lost Metal, I feel like it really showed the ramp up in technology and where things are headed for Scadrial. So I really liked that. And I felt like it was just very enjoyable to read in general. And like everybody else, I did have some complaints, just minor for me. Nothing like book breaking or anything, but I had some complaints with, let's keep it spoiler free, with the big bad. And I had a little bit of complaints with how certain characters' storylines were wrapped up a little bit. But that's it. All right. So it is very difficult to talk about this book without talking spoilers. And it's also quite difficult to talk about the book without talking about Cosmere spoilers. So we are going to be moving into our very spoilery section, and it will be very spoilery.
Yes.
So if you do not want any Cosmere spoilers, just be warned. So guys, what is the Lost Metal?
Good question. I enjoyed that our fandom has the running joke of like, what is this thing? And Brandon's now just incorporated it into his actual books.
I think that, I honestly think that it is meant to be kind of ambiguous. I think he just, I think Brandon liked the title, and I think he wanted it to be kind of like, oh, you can kind of read it different ways because you have the in-world, they call the atium the lost metal. The Racium is very similar though, and it kind of features in this book. I guess maybe someone could argue it's Trellium. I don't know that it's very lost at all, but
the thing that came to my mind, like finishing the book and with the title, is that Brandon set the title for this book 6 years ago when he finished the last 2 books. And he might have had different thoughts in mind of what he actually was going to do with it at that point. And the book has changed over time, and it's just maybe not as much about what it was initially going to be about. And the focus on the metals and what is the lost metal just isn't the focus of this book anymore. But the title has been so prominent for 6 years that kind of changing it at this point would feel really jarring.
This isn't the Cytonic situation where he could just change it from nowhere to Cytonic relatively easily.
Oh, I mean, his publishers made him change that one.
Well, yeah, but
he
still.
didn't want to change it.
It's not been 6 years between Starsight and Cytonic, so definitely think that played a part in it.
I definitely think that Jessie has a good point about the lost metal being an in-world term, and it gives the last book a really nice, good feel for being an Era 2 book. As I was reading the preview chapters, or for people who weren't reading the preview chapters, that was chapters prologue through 19, I guess. I was thinking it was going in a different direction than it was going. I was thinking they were going to be specifically finding atium and Laracium from the interaction between Harmonium and Trellium, or Bavadinium. But it didn't quite go. I mean, that was part of the plot point, but it wasn't the main plot point, which was kind of interesting to me. But in my mind, the lost metal was a lost god metal. So I feel like it still fits the theme of the book.
Yeah, and I agree. I think you can make a case for all of the 3 god metals we did see here, like atium, because it literally is called the lost metal. Laracium, because I think it's like, of all the metals, it's sort of the one that is most lost to them in a way, because they really would need some sort of Mistborn injection again into their gene pool to sort of get powerful, or like have more powerful people again and things like that. So you could make the case for that. And Trellium, I think you can make a case for it being a lost metal, because presumably Trell has been investing into Schedule for some time. And so like the fact that has happened is sort of lost to history. So in that regard, it is sort of a lost metal to them. So yeah, I think, and I agree with Joshua that it is intentionally ambiguous, but I would also say that it is, or I agree that it is not necessarily the best title for this book, like, because I also expected, like Fel, that it would go in this direction, and like Rex and Steris's plot would be discovering this lost, or like discovering the actual way of splitting up Harmonium into the two metals. So yeah.
And like the other Era 2 books have more ambiguous names, and they are not as clear from the title what the book is presumably going to be about. Whereas the lost metal, like that phrase kind of makes a lot of sense. It's like, oh, we're going to figure this out. But also the seeding of atium as the lost metal through all of the other Era 2 books really gave a certain expectation, I think, that the other titles didn't give.
That is a very good point, because really atium didn't play a huge part in this book at all. I mean, maybe like one little side character, just that guy, wandering around. But yeah, that it is kind of strange that it's named the Lost Metal, but I still like it. I think it flows off the tongue really well. So
yeah.
And it is a great title for a book. It just doesn't fit perfectly with the expectations that it created and what this book ended up being.
Definitely. Does anybody have any thoughts about like the overarching main plot of this book?
Yes.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I think this is probably one thing that a lot of us feel. We'll see. I found the structure of the plot a little bit frustrating. I did not love how Marcy split off from Wax and Wane and how Steris was isolated from everybody else. It allowed for some good pacing, maybe, with like each of their climaxes kind of hitting at different points. And it let there be a lot of things going on. And it was varied in what was happening for the second half. But it felt very kind of disconnected to me. And I wish that there had been a little bit more, I don't know, cohesion to the story.
Yeah.
So I will say that for like the plot as a whole, it's difficult because it's almost like there's not like, it kind of splinters at the end to where it doesn't even almost feel like there's a singular plot happening. I do like certain character arcs. I like certain plots. But as a whole, there's kind of like no like unifying plot, which is kind of weird because the other Era 2 books are a lot tighter in what they're doing in that way.
Yeah, and it feels disconnected in a way that I haven't felt for a Brandon book since Elantris, with the 3 separate plot lines and going like through each one. Like even Stormlight, where we have such large like spaces of time without seeing characters. Like we don't see Dalinar in like Shallan's sections of Way of Kings and vice versa. And like same with Rhythm of War, it has these big sections of, okay, we're going to focus on this set of characters for this part. And these 2 are the through lines. And then they switch off. This one, it felt even more disconnected than that. Even when it wasn't such like large spaces of time where we weren't seeing one character. And so like, I like individual plots. I really like Marassi's plot. And it was great to see Steris POVs. But just they don't come together in the way Brandon plots usually do, even if we do have the Sanderlanche that's staggered between the different POVs.
Listening to the way Joff described it, it reminds me a lot of the end of Oathbringer, where we have the 2 separate groups that eventually come together. And it just didn't feel like they came together in the end. Like they sort of almost did, but then we just moved on to the epilogues. And like there wasn't really that much of a resolution there. And I know some of my frustrations with the ending come from the fact that there were resolutions to certain plot lines, but it just didn't feel like the whole story had a resolution. And some of the plot lines felt like, okay, it's kind of the end, but there isn't that much of a payoff in terms of what the characters are getting out of what they did. Although I didn't actually mind that they split up. I didn't have a problem with that structure. I just thought that one of the storylines was completely boring and I did not care about it whatsoever. And another one, like, I liked it, but it felt like it was just trying to fill time as well, and was we're doing like full spoilers here, aren't we?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, okay. For some reason I was like, I have to talk around things. Yeah, so I like,
go for it.
I did not care about the Wax and Wane plot whatsoever. I thought it was really boring. Nothing seemed to be happening, and they seemed to just kind of be filling time so that the other plots could happen. And that was really frustrating. And then the Steris plotline, I liked that Steris was doing something, but it felt like it didn't matter all that much what she was doing. And it's just like we were kind of watching her do something so she was in the story, instead of like it actually having really that much of an impact. And like I reread the end of Steris's storyline and chapters, and like there was the payoff of like the tsunami hitting, but it just didn't feel like an actual moment. It felt like okay, we've got to like wrap this up so we can move on. And that really frustrated me about Steris's plotline. There were some other things, but overall, that's my thoughts of the plotlines.
With Steris, it was frustrating to me that she was split off from the rest of the group, and it did some really good things for her character. Like she had a really great character arc of like growing in confidence and seeing that other people could appreciate her and her skills. So I like that for her, and I don't know. I wish she had been with the rest of the group. I don't know how Brandon could have explored those themes for her in that setting. I also have I can't think of any logical reason why Steris would have gone to building you know, but I wish that there had been some way to get her there. Maybe pair her with Marcy during the finale.
Yeah.
I think that would have been really fun to like see them interact with each other, just so that she was more like involved in what the rest of the group was doing. That's just kind of where I was at with her.
To add the Steris complaint that I had is like, I really liked her character arc. I liked her growing from it. It felt like the conclusion of it, though, was someone else doing something. Like, it was the person on the ship who she thought was Wax, and it was actually Wayne. They're the one that saved the day in the end. And it didn't feel like it was about Steris at all. So it just, that really bugged me that someone else kind of wrapped up her plot for her.
I do agree with that, but I also agree with Josh that it's kind of difficult to. I do personally do not see how he could have given Steris a plot, which I'm very thankful for that we finally get some Steris POVs and she actually does something in the books. But yeah, I definitely also agree that like her actual conclusion is very much like she does all the preparations and everything, but then the execution of the plan, she has some hand in that, but it's still like others are doing the actual protecting, and the actual like Wayne is doing the one who saves the day in the end, as you said. So I can definitely see where you're coming from there, and I would have liked something else for her as well, but I just, like Josh said, I don't necessarily see how we could have gotten that, unfortunately. But yeah, I would have liked to see, going into this book, I expected to see her stay with, or for Wax to stay with her. Like that I remember in the Lost Previews, that's basically how we were seeing it going. And so I personally was very surprised, like structure-wise, that we did see Wax and Wayne joining up again and like doing their thing. And I do agree with you, Jess, that it was kind of boring at points, and like that when they had their own personalized villains that they fight again, I really didn't care so much about that. So yeah, it's an odd one, and I'm not sure if like Wax staying with Steris would have helped any at all, because then it would like have been Wax doing all the stuff and Steris being ignored by all the politicians. So I don't have a fix or anything for this, but this is like sort of how I felt about the plot. That I really enjoyed Marasi's plot and all the Ghostbloods things, of course, but her end is what I have issues with, but we can get to that later on, I think.
And I think that part of the problem with this book is that looking at it from a writer's perspective, I can identify the problems, but I don't know how we're supposed to solve them. Great that Steris had an amazing character arc, but well, then the ending there was a bit disappointing because of what all you guys have been saying. But I don't see any way of fixing that. Like, how could she have that character arc? And also, well, what would have the city done if Steris had gone with Marasi, for example, or with Wax? And then what you're bringing up, if Wax stayed with Steris, then you lose opportunity for the character arc again. And I think the real problem with this book is that it had too much to do for the space it had, even if it was 50% longer than Alloy. It had so much to do, and that plus all the Cosmere stuff, it is never going to be able to wrap up everything perfectly.
I think you're right. I think that like part of me wants to like think like, oh, I can take all these things and like rearrange them in some way that like makes a tighter book. But I think probably to what the real kind of underlying issue is with that is that Era 2 sort of ballooned, in this book at least, into something a lot bigger than what it started as. And it's almost like Brandon like couldn't have like done everything in one book, bring it all together. There's still other things that fans are probably thinking like, oh, I wish we had dealt with the Scadrians, the Southern Scadrians more. I wish we had dealt with whatever happened to the Bands of Mourning more, you know, and like, it's already so big. And like the only like way to fix it almost is to like not have Steris POVs at all, you know, which like we would have been upset if that happened too.
Yeah.
So
it's actually really interesting listening to you guys saying that, didn't like the Wax and Wayne parts as much, and you liked the Marasi parts more, and you didn't like the Steris parts, because it's the complete opposite for me. I adored the Wax and Wayne parts. I was actually in the previews, I was thinking, oh, it's going to be a Wayne and Marasi book. And it wasn't. It went back to wax and wane, which is really nice because they play off of each other so well. And they're, you know, for an ending for Wayne, spoilers. For an ending for him, it was good that he was there with his one good friend. It was perfect. So I was very happy with that. And with Steris, so there were a lot of theories that, oh, Steris is an ATM misting, or Steris is going to do this or use the bands or something. I'm actually really glad that Steris had a normal plot line. Like that's her skills, her natural gifts are in planning and, you know, delegating and everything. So I feel like her story was very good for her. I do agree that the ending of her storyline was a little sad because she kind of downplayed her role in saving the city. Because she's like, oh, well, it wasn't that bad of a tsunami or whatever. But I mean, that was because of her. She evacuated that part. She scuttled the ships, and she came into her own in this book, which was really nice. And I feel like it really fits the theme that I read of acceptance of someone's own abilities. So that was just my 2 cents about Steris and the rest of the plot lines.
I just had a thought regarding Steris, because I think for me, if the tsunami hitting Elendel had been like an actual big scene and like being this like it being the worry that it was presented as, and that's how we saw it, I think that would have helped a bit for me instead of it just kind of happening and then moving on. But I just had the thought, if we had a POV from some random person like right near the end who's like trying to get out and like then running into Steris's plans, and that helps them escape the tsunami, I think that would have really helped.
Just kind of wrap it up
you're
a little
right.
bit.
Yeah. And then we're seeing the results of what she's doing instead of just kind of knowing that she's doing stuff, but not seeing that on screen. And Brandon does put random POVs and things, like the Aiden chapter in Furthermore.
Yeah, he put one in this book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. The guy on the ship.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about him. He was not very memorable. So
Yes. Yes.
I wanted to transition to talking about the book as a whole within this series, because Joff touched on a couple of things before that are basically why this book didn't work for me from the get-go. And it ties into what Veronica was saying about how there's just so much in it, and that there's too much in it for it to wrap up. The problem that I had is I do not think that this book actually deals with the expectations that it set up in the other books. And there was a lot of things that coming out of Bands, I was like, oh, we're going to deal with the Southerners, and we're going to like deal with the Basin War. And we don't. We really don't. The Southerners very much have been like kind of pushed to the side as a, like, this is an Era 3 thing, like come back later. And even the Civil War in the Basin, nothing's happened really in 6 years. And I have another rant that can go off of that, but I will hold it for later. Like nothing's really happened between Elendel and the outer cities that I would have thought after the point of tension that they were at the ends of Bands of Mourning. Like they looked like they were on the verge of war, and then there's just nothing. And then this book, it does sort of tie into the Civil War, but it's not about the Civil War. It's about Telsin. It's about the set. And they do play a role in the wider politics of the Basin. But this book isn't really exploring that or following that part of the story. It really is just focused on, well, we have to stop the set, and then that will affect the Basin. But it really felt like the Basin was going to go to war regardless of whether the set was there or not when, like, Bands of Mourning finished. So there's just some really big plot points that were left at the end of Bands of Mourning that this book does not look at all. And these seem like really, particularly the Civil War, like that's really relevant to Era 2, right? Like if we jump forward 80 years, are we just going to hear about the outcome and not see it, even though we were in the middle of it? Those things really frustrate me. And the more I read of the book and the further I got through, the more disappointed I felt, because it became clearer that the book was not going to follow up on what I felt it promised in book 3. And that made it really hard to enjoy the book that we got, because it's not the book that I thought we were getting. And then there's the Lost Metal stuff on top of that. But I care less about like allomancy and metal and stuff. So I care about like the bigger plot points and characters.
Yeah.
So.
I do see what you're saying about the disappointment of it, because there were some points that I did feel disappointment about. Like they brought up this Bands of Mourning plot point about how it was drained, and then never really did anything with it, and that felt like extra, and so that was kind of frustrating to me. But I wouldn't call myself the most like critical reader, so I still found enjoyment in reading the whole book at, you know, wax and wane, and this one plot point of them versus Telsin /Trell. So I feel like that main plot did carry the book along, and it was very enjoyable to read. And in the back of my mind, I just had a little bit of disappointment in not seeing the Malwish, not seeing more kind of lost metal-y things that I wanted to see.
So I was actually happy with the way that the basin politics was handled. I guess I liked Wax being a part of kind of like becoming more of a politician and trying to kind of mediate that and bring some kind of reconciliation there. And I felt like in his epilogue, I was pleased enough with how that wrapped up. I guess maybe I was never super invested in it to begin with, and so the way it did wrap up, I was pleased with. This the Southerners I was a little bit disappointed by, but I think I'm realizing that Era 2 was not a planned era in Mistborn, and I think that in my mind, like when it turned into a full-sized era in some sense, I sort of imagined that I gave it maybe equal status to the other ones. And I think maybe in Brandon's mind, it's always been more of an interlude kind of era. And so I think that I probably need to go back and like read the whole thing, maybe with that in mind, that this is not trying to be a complete story in the sense that the other 3 kind of mainline eras are, but it's kind of trying to be just kind of do something fun in between. And so I think that might change my perspective. I think that's just kind of my expectations that were misplaced.
Yeah. And there was so much setup for Era 3 done here. Era 1 never had to deal with that. Because Ben was like, okay, well, there's some things that I'm going to have to squeeze in and reorganize for Era 3, like from Era 1. And then Era 2 happened, and he had to change that. And that's where Secret History came from, and that's where like the whole set thing came from. Era 1 never had to deal with having a lot of setup. All Era 1 had to do was conclude the plot lanes satisfactorily, and it did that.
There's
this had so much work to do.
Lines.
Can I say
so many of them?
I really want Secret History 2 of Kelsier in the South.
Oh yeah,
after this book.
Yes.
Like I've always wanted that, but now I really want that.
Just to fill in the gaps of Malwish stuff that we were missing out on.
Partly like wanting the gaps filled in, and partly like it was so much fun seeing Kelsier again, and I just it really kind of stoked that fire for me.
So I tempered my expectations from the get-go for the Southerners, because I don't know, the way Brandon talked about it before, I never felt like we would see much of them. I do agree with the Civil War thing, that we never really saw that become anything, and I did feel like the offhanded remark at the end in the epilogue, like, oh, they kind of dealt with it and built up a new assembly or something. I do not recall exactly what it was. And that like now they're onto dealing with people in the roughs trying to form their own nations and whatever. That didn't feel quite satisfactory to me, but I guess at least could explain it away to me in my head that like the set was really the main driving force between or there to sort of force a rift between the like outer cities and the base, or like Elendel. And now that the set, or at least the leadership of the set, isn't there anymore to do that, maybe that's why it sort of fizzled out. I don't know, but what I do really like is how we now got all the set up for regarding the Southerners. I really feel like Cold War is what we are going to see like in Era 3. Like we have the perspective, they basically have nuclear weapons that they both can use against each other more or less. They sort of are on the track to ballistic missiles. So it really feels like also with the 1980s era and everything that Era 3 will be. I do really think that is where we are going. And something that a plot point from Ella of Law that was actually concluded in this one is the community and what happened to the kidnapped girls.
Yes.
And that is something I really like, that we finally got some answers to that. And it was not a bad answer, I think. Like these sort of like that the set put on a hoax, that the world had already ended and everything. I really liked that as an idea. So that I was quite satisfied with.
Yeah, that was like a way more fun, like, I don't know, idea of like what they were doing with those kidnapped people than I expected.
It took a little bit of suspension of disbelief for me. If you think about these people, they're not dumb people that they kidnapped. So they can look out of this window and see this like flickering video being played out of the porthole or whatever.
Yeah, but cameras didn't even exist before, like at the time they were captured,
When they
because
were
wasn't.
captured.
Yeah, it wasn't until like Bands of Mourning.
Bands, I think.
that Vendel came in with like his like projector. It's like that was like a new thing to them. And so in my mind, at least, it makes sense that like they just have no concept of that kind of technology.
I really liked the ash falling and that whole mystery of what it was. I thought that was going to be a bigger thing, though. Like when we found out what it was, I was like, that's cool. But then we just moved on from it. And I don't know. I had this idea that it was going to be like this bigger thing, but it was really cool. And it is interesting to see the changes in technology and how that is affecting people.
For a brief moment there, I thought that they were using like ATM somehow to like see the future of the world.
Yeah, same.
And I was like, oh, that is so cool.
100%. Like they were developing the photos.
Yeah, I thought I was a little bit disappointed that they weren't actually like seeing the future somehow. But
yeah, like if you, I'll have to share this in the Discord with everyone because these are like private reactions. But there were a couple of times that I wrote that like, okay, are they actually using fortune as in capital F fortune from the Cosmere, this thing Coin uses to know where to be? And then it was like, oh, well, that's not what it is. This is fun. But I genuinely thought it was, they had access to this thing that is canon and so is possible. I was like, how are they doing this? But I thought that the solution disappointed me because I was like, oh, this is completely unexpected, but really cool. Just nothing like I thought it was going to be.
I think a lot of us, like, we're so steeped in the Cosmere and so steeped in the magic that when there's a mystery like this, we assume that there is a magical solution to it, or like that is the reason behind it. So to have like a mundane, like real world solution is like, oh, I mean, that's cool, but it's a little bit of a letdown, but it is cool.
I was happy with what happened with the community.
Yeah,
like,
same.
It was pretty chilling when she got in there and you realized what was happening. I like that.
When they stumbled upon that experiment that they were doing with the spikes through like normal, just regular people,
Normal
right?
people.
I mean, people who were specifically chosen because they're from Alamantic and I guess just specific lines, but they were able to pull 5% of the spikes. Was it 5% of the spikes?
Something like that. Yeah, some friction.
Something like that. And they were able to just pull like pure investiture, was it?
Yeah, that was creepy.
I actually got the impression that at that point, the people that they were pulling it from weren't even from known Alamantic lines. And they were just pulling part of it from like the Scadrian people because they have like the investiture from how they were created. Which is terrifying.
Yes, it's very terrifying.
Very scary. But it's an interesting thing because it's almost like a little behind the scenes nod that Brandon gave the reader that there's lots of developments happening in this era because we see the big technological advancements like cars and rockets and guns and all of that, but they're also experimenting magic stuff. Yeah. So that's really exciting because I want to see where that leads to later on.
One of the cool magic technology, I don't know if this was meant to be like a metaphor similarity thing, but it jumped out to me because like the technology is getting better and the magic is mixing with the technology. And in this, we get an artificial perpendicularity, which just seems very similar in the sense that, like, in Stormlight, we see the natural ones, and yes, Dalinar can call on its perpendicularity, and I think Brandon's confirmed that, like, Else Callers and that create, like, mini perpendicularities, but that all seems like a natural progression of the magic, whereas this was a completely artificial creation of the magic using something else. And it just fits so well for me because they have this forward movement with technology, and this just seemed like the same thing, but on the magic side.
And at the end, when Kelsier is talking to Harmony about you need to push people to work more on technology and to discover things, and Harmony's like, no, I can't interfere. It just shows, like, kind of human ingenuity in, like, we're just curious people. So we experiment and we learn and we do some, unfortunately, they do some unsavory things with these experiments. So it felt very natural to see this.
It is going to be very interesting for Era 3 because it's kind of like Cold War based, and so much of the technological development around that time happened because of the First and Second World Wars. And so what is going to take their place for Scadrial? What is going to push them to develop the things that were developed in the real world, or, well, Magitech equivalents that will take them to that Cold War era? I don't know. I am very curious about how the technology is going to work in Era 3, and it's going to take a while to find out, but it's going to be very interesting.
In terms of the Hemology laboratory plot, there is one thing about it, like, I think is really cool. I really like the scene. There's one thing about it that bugs me. There's a diary that gets sort of destroyed, and Moonlight's like, it's fine, guys. I have the magical reversal stamp that can fix it. And then nothing happens with it.
Well,
and I'm
she
just
leaves.
like, is she coming back? Like, are we going to get more from this? Because at least a lot of the other open plot lines, I'm like, okay, this is set up for Era 3. I don't know how that's setting up for Era 3, I guess.
Well, this actually is a good segue into discussing the Ghostbloods themselves.
Yes.
And our Outworlders, which we see a whole bunch of new characters and abilities and some familiar faces coming back. What do you guys think about the whole Ghostbloods plotline?
I loved it.
I did not expect to like the Ghostbloods after this book. After all we've had with them on Rosha and Mraze and Yetil, like, they didn't seem like the nicest people. But now that we also know that sort of their main mission is to protect Scadrial, it's understandable that they would be much more protective and, like, nice on Scadrial, while on Rosha that's like foreign territory for them. They don't have to care as much about the people there. So yeah, I was surprised to like them. And I mean, all the Cosmere stuff we got was just fantastic. Twin Souls is great. All the Lantris references, Cell references. And we have Shy, we have Kesa, we have a reference to Alien. There, like, all the things. So I really, really loved that part.
The Ghostbloods. So we have Kelsier, of course, which is really cool that we got to see our Era 2 character talking to Kelsier, which I just loved that. We have Moonlight, who is Shei.
In a pronunciation.
Congratulations, you just made the comments go wild.
So we have Moonlight, we have Twin Soul, who is a standout character in my eyes. I just adored Twin Soul. There was also Codenames Are Stupid, which is amazing. A little sad we didn't get more Codenames. And then who are some others?
Well, she was Kay's from Elantris as well.
Right.
However you pronounce that
Elantris,
theoretically.
Yeah.
I tried, but it's not easy.
And then at the very end, we see, we also have Delaval, who is someone with a mask on, their face kind of growing over the mask, very similar to someone that we know from Stormlight. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'll just say it how I say it in my head. Ayatil? Ayatil? Seattle. That's the only one actually in the Ghostbloods who seemed a little bit more sinister than anyone else. So that was kind of interesting because he's like, we need to get rid of Marcy. And I was like, no. So these are very, very interesting people. And for people who haven't read the Greater Cosmere, I think it was done really well because I was reading alongside my husband who has not really read a lot of the other Cosmere books, and he was enjoying it just as much as I was. And I had all of the background info for the Easter eggs. So I think it was handled very well.
I really loved like the introduction to especially Twin Soul, where like we're getting a character who has this kind of magic we've never seen before. And from a world we've never seen, like this is all completely fresh to whether you've read the Cosmere or not, whether you've read other Cosmere books or not. And so I think that like that kind of demonstrates the way that like this is how, you know, Shay may not be as foreign, it may not be as like, you know, weird and otherworldly as him if you have read the rest of the Cosmere, you know, but it's kind of gives you a sense of like what that looks like if you haven't read everything. I don't know if I'm making sense, but I think that Brandon handles it really well. Like explaining the things you need to know and the things that you don't know are not points that you're going to stumble on. They're just mystery. You know, there's something interesting, something to look forward to, something to wonder about.
Brandon's done very well at making this an introduction point for those connections instead of it seeming like you need to know things to understand them. Because you can go from this book and you're like, wow, Moonlight's great. Where do I find more Moonlight? And then read Emperor's Soul. And I think that's going to work perfectly fine.
Yeah. And I think that's balance between like the Easter eggs and that knowledge that people already have and being an introduction was done really well, even if this is Brandon, the gloves are off Sanderson. Because this book was insanity in terms of the Cosmere. There is so much, but it still works as an introductory point. I guess those people are going to be a bit more confused, and I really wish we could like talk to some more people who are Mistborn only readers who haven't read anything at all except Mistborn in the Cosmere. Brandon manages to explain the things that need to be explained easily, like Shai stamps. Yes, he goes more into detail in Emperor, sort of like, oh, well, this is how the process for carving the stamps works, etc., etc. But here he's like, okay, these stamps have the ability to do this, and he sets the rules, the limitations that they have. And leaves the mystery of, well, how they work, the mechanics behind them for Emperor Soul and things like that. And I really like that comparison we have between the elements we already knew of the Cosmere and then the new things with Twin Soul and the Aethers that people who haven't read Aether of Night wouldn't know. And even people who have read Aether of Night, Brandon has changed a lot.
Yeah, it has changed.
So it's new for everybody.
And I think the fact that we see it all from Marcy's perspective, who is a detective, and also a Scadrial native, which is what our perspective is as a reader, it's really nice. And I got a big chuckle out of her and Moonlight talking about how, oh, so that's not magic, but this is. And she's like, well, yeah, if you ingest this metal, this is what happens. That's just the normal physics. Like, this is an understood thing. So it was really nice to see that and have Brandon kind of acknowledge that.
I kind of liked when Marasi first went to this Ghostblood like hideout and when Twin Source gets introduced, and I really liked how Brandon sort of wrapped it in. Yeah, he has these magic powers because like he makes his pen with the rose side, he builds a whole chair with the rose side, he has this cup that he builds with the rose, like he constantly is using his powers. Like see there's something you're not understand or you don't understand yet going on there. And I just enjoyed like the scene, like all these like really offhanded remarks from the Ghostbloods themselves, like I know there's an identity lock on something, or it's an awakened lock or an awake lock, I think is what Shai ends up calling it. And I do think that it's like these are things that even to us are like we understand the terms, but we really don't understand mechanics behind them either. And so somebody who hasn't read all the Cosmere is sort of like not quite at the same level as we are in understanding these, but like not that far behind because it's all new to us too. And seeing it all so interconnected is new to us as well. So I don't think it is that different in that regard, at least.
I think that Brandon did very well with basically showing Twin Souls magic versus showing Moonlight's magic. He's kind of set them up in the same way. So like most of us have no idea about Aethers, and we're like, wow, look at this cool thing that we'll learn more about later. And I think Brandon did very well at doing the same thing with the stamps and the Celish magic. And it comes across as, wow, look at this cool thing that you can learn more about later.
So Twin Soul, since he's kind of new to everybody, really, he has a symbiotic relationship with this thing, Silajana. And Silajana is the crystal. Is that what it is? That's the Aether?
So there are these things called like the primal Aethers that are where the like smaller Aethers that people have come from. And I mean, he has this whole philosophy and kind of feels almost like a religion about Silajana. But his Aether is like a bud of that. That's how they call it. It's this like separate like part that comes from Silajana, but his Aethers, it isn't like a spren where each spren has its name. And each, like, if we see other Aether bound in the future, they will say, oh, well, my Aether is whatever. Like spren, like Sil and Pattern. They're like, no, they're all connected through their Aethers to Silajana, at least the ones that have a connection to Roselight. Also, correct me if I ever say Amberite, because that's my default that I haven't switched.
From the unpublished Aether or Aether of Night. Okay.
I don't think that his local bud that he has on him is like its own sentient thing. I think it's literally just a connection to the primal Aether. Yeah. But yeah, I thought that was, I don't know, he's pretty fascinating. It's a really cool culture. It's a really cool magic.
But also
I'm excited to see more.
Yeah, in a way, and it does appear to be like, not sentient or whatever, but like it has senses over this bud. So like because he uses the crystal and growth to like spy on things. So sort of it's really an extension of Silajana in a way to their sense system. It reads to me like a hive mind, basically, is what it is. And yeah.
It reminds me of Autonomy. Because Autonomy has all of these
avatars.
Avatars. I was thinking vessels, but that was the right word. Like has all of these avatars that are kind of like budded off from Autonomy, but still are Autonomy. And it's just a very similar relationship that just jumped to mind.
Okay, now I'm gonna have to write this down because I need to bring this theory up on Aethercast when that happens.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I have a crazy theory that I brought up to my husband like late at night. I was like, I bet Adonalcium is an Aether because I've seen like I can see all of these different things that are similar to stuff that we see in the other different magic systems, and the whole idea of crystals and shards and things. It just really felt like it to me. So when he was mentioning that the Aethers predate the shattering of Adonalcium, that kind of put that little thought in my head.
So I did, I guess, just to back up to the Ghostbloods in general. I really like that Brandon gave us all these really sympathetic characters. Like obviously, whatever his name was, Level. Like he's a pretty sketchy guy, right? But the others are all really lovable. We have Codenames, who we've seen before. She's really lovable. She continues to be that here. Moonlight is maybe a little bit more, secretive, but we've seen her before. She's been a protagonist. She's pretty endearing, and Twin Soul is the most endearing person ever. And so I like that the Ghostbloods are not like, they're obviously doing some things that are questionable, that are, are not like, morally, they're not white knights. They've got Kelsier at their head, and I'm glad that Kelsier is not just full on psychopath. Like he's doing crazy stuff. He's trying to do something that he thinks is right. He's trying to protect his home planet, with Sazed clearly, being unstable. And I think that he's just trying to do his best and maybe doing some things that are questionable. And I like that the Ghostbloods are interesting in that way, that they're not just kind of put into this corner as antagonists in the Cosmere.
We had a conversation once on one of these span reads. I don't know if it was Secret History or one of the other ones. We were talking about Kelsier and his crews, basically, and how Kelsier works better when he has a group of people with him. And I think it goes the other way as well. Like, it's very interesting seeing the difference between the Ghostbloods on Scadrial versus Roshar. And the Scadrial ones really have kind of mimicked that Era 1 crew vibe almost, where Kelsier does kind of keep them in line, but he also is affected by who they are as well. And it also kind of reminds me of Era 1. We love the crew. They're great. They're terrible people. Like, a different story from a different perspective. They are the villains. They're not good people. But the difference that perspective can have, where we're seeing kind of from the inside of the Ghostbloods out when Marasai is joining them versus like Shallan's view of the Ghostbloods and it being very outside in and not seeing a lot of the internal connections as well. But I think the fact that Kelsier is actually at the head of this group in the Ghostbloods is very telling of like what he is after versus what other people are kind of doing in his name almost.
And again, it comes back to this comparison Brandon has always done between Kelsier and his crews, like within the Ghostbloods, and the way Tor worked when Tom Doherty was at its head versus after his retirement. The way he could like rein editors in a little bit before, and now it's more, well, each editor does like their own thing.
And I think Joshua put a good point ahead that Kelsier's goal is to protect Scadrial, and we're seeing the Ghostbloods acting to protect Scadrial directly. Like, this is their prime directive. So they're, of course, going to be friendly with the locals. They're going to be helping them protect their land and their planet. And they're, willing to extend a hand to Marasai, but not wanting to give her all the secrets up front until she agrees to join them. So, there is always another secret. And we still don't know exactly, and I don't think I know exactly what their main goal is in protecting Scadrial. I feel like I don't know why Scadrial is so important. If anybody has enlightenment for me, I would really appreciate that, but I don't quite get it yet.
I think Kelsey's motivation is just like, it's his homeworld, and presumably, like what we find out in Summon Archive, he's still bound to it somehow. Like he can't leave himself, so he probably will do his best to protect it, and it's something like that.
Why is Moonlight so?
I was about to bring it up.
Invested in this, yeah.
Yeah, like the motivation for like Moonlight, Twin Soul, all the other non-natives, like what is their motivation? That is something I'm really like interested to find out.
What I think is that more and more we're going to see like these sort of alliances being formed between different groups and different planets that, as the Cosmere moves towards some kind of end game in Mistborn Era 4, whatever that looks like, I think that it's going to be kind of people making these alliances and agreements that are mutually beneficial. So I think that, like Twin Soul, I get the sense that there's something going on his home planet that's not good, that's not safe, he doesn't like. And he's probably thinking, hey, if I help out this guy and these guys to establish this planet, maybe I can get some allies to help go back and, deal with whatever's going on my planet. And it's harder. I don't really know what Moonlight is. She might just like not really care. She might just be kind of more of like a freelance, like I don't care about my planet. These are some cool people. I like being part of what they're doing kind of a thing. But
that's the vibe I got.
Yeah, and she also mentioned Hoyt was a big part of why she joined the Ghostbloods. Like, she was keeping an eye on him.
I like that little moment.
They're keeping an eye on each other, but yeah.
When they were both like the car drivers and like looked at each other and like, they recognize each other. Yeah.
Kind of bummed that we've seen them fail twice now to recruit a young woman to their to their ranks.
I'm frustrated that it happened back to back as well.
Yeah.
Because the last Cosmere book to come out was Rhythm of War. And like, I think Marasai made the right decision for her character. And I accept that. And I hate everything about it because it happened right after Shallan did the same thing. And that really frustrates me. It's like the constant teasing, but never giving the out, like the...
Like, I need answers.
Yeah, I need answers.
I'm sure they'll be successful soon, because Brandon is probably aware of, okay, this has happened twice. Kind of like what he was talking about with Odium in the Stormlight. Like, he's been defeated twice. We need to change things up. So I think they'll be successful somewhere in the near future.
Well, it's also the hook, like to keep us reading and to keep everybody like who's even the tiniest bit curious about what their motivations are and people who are just now getting the connections between the Cosmere. It's like a big draw when you have little mysteries that are just hinted at here and there, kind of sprinkled in. So,
and I think to some extent it might just be that like this is the end of Era 2, so will Marasi even still, like, they might have time dilation, shenanigans going on or whatever to stay alive longer or something like that, but, like, would she even still be alive by the time we could see her actually doing Ghostblood stuff? And so now Shallan, maybe something happens to her in Stormlight 5, who knows, that makes it, like, less interesting for her to be in the Ghostblood. So Brandon is like, okay, I won't even let them join yet, and instead focus on like having characters already in it in the organization, because like another initiation plot I'm not that interested in. Like, I don't care for that anymore, I think, unless it's, I mean, Brandon would probably manage to make it very interesting. But yeah, I think like in future books, we're just going to see already initiated Ghostbloods do their thing. And yeah,
I think Shallan is also, even though she hasn't been set up to join the Ghostbloods, it really feels like she's set up to explore the Cosmere. So I wouldn't be surprised if like she does end up going past Stormlight and into other things maybe in the future. And I can definitely see Brandon not wanting to do that twice in a row as well and set up another character who's going to continue on in the Cosmere for longer through a similar path as well. Eric has this idea, though, because Marasi is running for governor or is governor in the epilogue. I can't remember which. Of like Marasi turning up in Era 3 as like the 85-year-old like amazing like governor that has like pulled Elendil and Scadrial through this time of war or something.
That would be fun.
That's actually the impression that I was getting from the end of the book.
I imagine like meeting her like retire, like she's been like president for, you know, several years or whatever, and she's retired, and like the you know, the protagonist having to go like meet up with her. That would be, I don't know, that'd be really
cool.
fun.
That'd be really fun.
and Max or someone will be like the wise governor.
that was such a good, I was skeptical, I guess, of where her plot was going. And I really love, I guess the crisis that she kind of goes through of like, what am I doing anymore at this point? And I thought that was a really fitting conclusion for her to kind of come through everything and realize what it is that's important to her, and then, you know, strive for even greater things than, you know, when this era began, she just wanted to be a simple, you know, cop, and now she's kind of going to big places to make the world a better place. So that's pretty cool.
The through line with Marasi's character development is really nice, considering like not only that did she want to become a cop and ally, but the way she was going about it, of like having these grander ideas of you need to have societal change and structural change to make these things better long term. That's not something you could do as a cop. That is something you could do as the governor. So it really rounded out her character really well to end up in that position to do what she always wanted to do, and she's just had to take a bit of an interesting path to emotionally get there herself.
And it's really interesting with just looking at the specific characters themselves and their own personal plot line in this book. In my mind, when I was reading it, I felt like the main theme was accepting who you are. And so, like, for example, Wax accepts himself as a father, a politician, a lawman. Wayne had to accept himself for the hurt that he did to another person, and he had to accept, you know, how he fits into the grand puzzle of things. Marasi had to accept herself as a upholder of the law, and Steris even accepting herself for how she is and how she handles things and how that fits into her government. So does anybody have any thoughts on character arcs in this book?
Which character do we want to start with?
Whatever one you would like to. Because we've already talked a little bit about Steris.
Steris,
Yeah.
We've already talked now about Marasi. Maybe we can talk a little bit about Wax's plot arc.
Yeah.
Sure.
Wax was probably the most frustrating character to me because I didn't. There were some seeds of some interesting ideas for what Brandon was doing with him, especially like accepting that he doesn't have to be, the lawman or the senator. He can he is bigger than those like defining terms. And I that was kind of late early on in the story. There was also kind of a little point about Telsin like thinking about him one way and him realizing, no, I'm not the same person, I've changed. But to me, Wax never really came together into something very cohesive for his character. I felt like mostly in this book he was just sort of being Wax, being cool. I mean, the Wax that we love, the Wax that is going out to shoot people up and do justice or whatever, his own way. And like he's a fun character, but I felt like he was mostly just being himself and being cool than like having like a direction for where his arc was going as a character arc.
Yeah. And I think Wax didn't need to have this big character arc. He already had that, particularly with Shadows and Bands. And it's been 6 years besides that. It was fine for Wax to take a back seat and leave the big character arcs to Wayne and Steris and Marasi. Because Wax has already had like most of his character. And yes, there were some tiny things that they explored in this book, but it didn't need to be this through line in the whole plot. And I'm happy with that. And I think that it's definitely going to be a topic that's going to come up on our Discord a lot because the whole Wax versus Wayne debate has been a constant and it comes up every single Era 2 podcast we have. And I'm really happy where Wax ended up. And I'm glad that he didn't need to be anything beyond the Wax we know and love in this book.
It did feel like the whole book was like one giant like Wax epilogue to me of like the era. Like he had like a 3-book story and like this is just like, and this is now this is where he's at. Which is not necessarily bad. It's just kind of weird expectation wise, I guess.
So for me, I really enjoyed him during the preview chapters, where this was all of part 1. But then I felt like when he talks to Harmony and like basically is convinced to become says it's sword again and everything, like I feel he regressed a little there and like, okay, I'll do it another time. And like, it's the 3rd time basically he's doing it now. So I get why Brent did that, because like it is the Wax and Wayne series. Like we need to see them for one, we need to see them together and we need to see them shoot stuff up, I guess, is the premise of the entire series. But I think it makes sense to some extent for Wax to like do that again, because out of a sense of duty and everything, and like he feels like that is like what he has to do. But I personally would have preferred him to, I don't know, like try to solve problems another way for once and not become Harmony's sword in a different way. Is what I would have liked. So yeah, I think like up until the point where he decides to go to Bilming, I liked his arc and everything, and then it's sort of like, okay, we're back to regular Wax, and so that's where I'm standing.
It is nice though, because he did take a back seat at the end of the book, because it was Wayne's moment. Wayne was the hero of this story that started from the prologue all the way to the end. So I think Wax had to be there for the Telsin conflict, which was resolved before they went to the final showdown. So I was happy with Wax's story. I didn't find it boring or anything, and I just loved seeing him spiked, which I was not expecting at all, and I was very excited to see. And it's a little sad that we can't really see much after the end of the book. Like there's no like after credit scene with Wax having this spike really, except for in the epilogue. But I was happy. I was pleased with how Wax's story ended.
I do want to add Wax having kids. Fantastic. There's not enough like parents in
That's so
fantasy.
cute.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Especially like Max needing to go potty on the airship. As a father, he was just like, this is perfect. This is real. So I like that. The scene where he shows up in Bilming, that first scene where he makes his dramatic entrance.
Of course.
It's kind of, on one hand, maybe it's kind of cliche, but it was just so fun.
Yeah.
Wax is always going to be dramatic, and we will love him for it.
I'm kind of with Josh in terms of Wax's arc. I like that this book had a bigger role for the other characters, the other main characters, but the series has always come across to me as like Wax is the main character, like the central main character. And it felt like he did very little in this book. And it felt like it tread a lot of ground that we've done before. Like his arc kind of came together, like his character emotional arc came together at the end of Bands of Mourning. And like he sort of had already dealt with the question of, oh, am I a lawman or am I this instead? Like that's just been a running theme, and it just felt like he had already decided that. And yeah, I agree with Marvin that it kind of regressed a bit when he decided to be Harmony's sword again, and it was the same angst as the last book when he was angry at Harmony, and I just didn't feel like he did stuff for like a lot of the time in Bilming. He just kind of went around and killed time and sometimes ran into an obstacle, but it didn't feel like he was doing things to me. He was just kind of waiting until the end of the book, because that's when you need to have the big conflict with Telsin. So I was incredibly frustrated with Max's storyline. I did not enjoy it whatsoever. And like there are particular scenes I did like the Wax and Telsin talks were very interesting. I love that in this book there are several times where people just start monologuing and other characters like, yeah, I'm gonna utilize this to my advantage, because like Telsin starts monologuing and Wax is like, I'm a yeet out of here now while you're not looking, and then like later Wayne starts monologuing to distract people and like keep them in a certain place for a certain amount of time. So I really liked that, and I liked the conflict between Wax and Telsin. It just felt like it was kind of put on pause for a lot of the book because we needed other things to happen for other people. And that was very frustrating when Wax is meant to be like the central main character. I did like Wax's interactions with Wayne, though. I did like their friendship. I do wish there was a bit more of it, but I really enjoyed how he kind of helped Wayne. And something that someone brought up in one of the comments of one of the other videos that is very interesting that I had thought of, Wax is a Mistborn now, and he can have more kids. And then they're going to get those genes and like that extra investiture somehow, maybe? So, and like, he's a very weak Mistborn, but it was just an interesting thought experiment of like, what consequences is that actually going to have?
Going to see the Ledrians be tyrants in Era 3.
No, don't say that.
I mean, again, we're heading for Cold War. We all know what happened before the Cold War.
The biggest thing that I had a problem with in this book personally is the conflict that Telsin started, basically. Like, I don't understand why she felt like the only way to stand out in Autonomy's eyes is by bombing a whole city and killing all of those people that she's wanting to take over. Is that it just didn't sit right with me. Maybe I didn't quite get the full picture. I'm not sure, but it just felt very thin for me. She's got to be pure evil if that was her plan. I mean, I know that she was involved in the whole kidnapping and breeding and stuff, and that was horrible because she mentioned that was Edouard's plan and she was kind of helping him with that, but that wasn't like technically her main goal. Her main goal was, so we have Autonomy coming in, shrouding over Scadrial and wanting to find someone who shows individualistic attributes. Am I on track here with Autonomy's goal? So that's That's what autonomy is all about. And so Trell is an aspect, or what is it, an avatar of autonomy, and invests Telsin. But I feel like it's not explained very well.
Is Telsin meant to be Trell?
Yes.
I was a bit I was a bit confused about that because like Trell was just a different person before this book.
And there was this religion, old religion of Trell, and now Telsin is Trell. It kind of felt really weird to me when I was trying to figure out what the big motivation behind Telsin's whole actions were.
So the only way I can make sense of the entire, when is it autonomy / Bavadin, when is it Trell, when is it Telsin? The only way I can make think of it is that at some point Bavadin sent Trell the Foreman as an avatar to Scadrial. They invested there. And then somehow just left the power behind or something. And then eventually Bavadin said, okay, I need another avatar there, and picked Telsin as that one. But it's confusing to me. It
is confusing.
Yeah.
I think that it's meant to be very weird and confusing. I think that whatever Bavadin is doing is intentionally, from what Brandon is doing, I think it's intentionally very weird and complicated. I don't think that Telsin has always been Trell. I don't know that an individual has been Trell. I think that for a time Trell was probably just an idea that Bavadin was sort of furthering for the sake of being able to bestow it upon somebody to make an avatar, so that there's this whole history and kind of weight behind that role. So I don't know. I would be interested to know if autonomy's influence on Telsin was part of what drove her to go to such an extreme measure, or if she had that extreme measure in mind even before autonomy's direct influence. I don't remember if that's clear or not from the book. I do think that she's a psychopath.
Yes.
Yes.
And harbors hate for her brother. And that definitely was her big push because of this, even from early prologues and flashbacks from Wax, it was always a Wax versus Telsin in her eyes. So I get that. It was just like the whole, all of these villains in Bilming are trying to prove themselves, and they have all these different ways of proving themselves. Like Adorn had the eugenics program, and Telsin has this bomb, and the other guy, what's his name?
Geff.
The scumbag guy, the governor of Bilming.
Geff something.
I think.
Entrone.
Entrone, yes.
Entrone, right. Yeah.
Entrone. Gave Entrone. So I just didn't really get it.
I think all the way back to Alloy of Law, the set's plan was sort of to destabilize the basin, to take control out of Elendel, and then kind of come in and be able to kind of restructure the power to take power themselves. And so I guess I imagine at some point Telsin just decided that she had to take an extreme measure to impress autonomy enough to kind of go to let her be in control rather than do her own thing.
Another thing that frustrates me a little bit about this plot point, but also this book in a larger sense, there's been a 6-year time gap, and there seems to be nothing that's happened in between. Yes, they were dealing with creating bombs and stuff, but it just felt like one story stopped, and then we fast forwarded through to get to the start of the second story, and there wasn't actually any story in between that happened. If it was in world,
I feel like there was. To me, Marcy and Wayne had a lot of development in between. Wax kind of found his role as a senator and figured out what that looks like. One thing you mentioned, Jessie, was the frustration about the development between the conflict in the basin. So maybe that was kind of a weird, but I don't know.
I feel like everything was happening in the background in those last 6 years, and Brandon figured the main story, Wax is a dad and Steris is, helping him, and they're doing science, and Marcy is, rising up in the ranks. And so it's not really like something that we needed to see on page, and it was just something that he could nod back to. But now we have a new threat that's rising up over these 6 years from the background is what I got.
It is interesting that we had a time jump in Rhythm of War, and now he's done like another one of these ways that these like two books are kind of similar, I guess. Well, people I think had the opposite issue with Rhythm of War, where they felt like, oh, like all this stuff happened, and I'm kind of catching up, and I feel like I missed it. So it's kind of funny, I guess, that.
Just to clarify, like, I know things changed, and like in this book, Wax is in a different position, Maricide's in a different position, and with her friendship with Wayne and stuff. But the characters feel the same. The characters don't feel like they have aged 6 years. It just feels like the same character from Bands of Mourning in a new book. It's kind of like in a theater production, like having a scene and then you go down with the lights and you come up and the scenery's changed and things have changed. But there's nothing really in between. You're just jumping from one to the other. I don't know if that makes a little bit more sense. Like, I was talking to a friend the other day who said that Brandon's books, if you read them kind of all together, they feel very samey. They don't feel like they have progress in them sometimes. The character voices are the same, even though time has changed. And it doesn't show the change, it just kind of tells you that time has moved. And this book really showed that for me. Like, there was just a lot of stuff that was kind of set up at the end of Bands of Mourning, like even just little things that it's like, oh, this is different now. And we see none of that. We just now know the difference.
I think to some extent that is sort of intentional, that like the characters have, like, they are the same as at the ends of Bands of Mourning, but more so like they are at the end of Bands of Mourning. Like, they have grown into their roles now. Like, for instance, Miraz is like really a constable now and like grown into the role. Wax has taken up that senator role, is really grown into it. And so like the point is sort of that these last 6 years were very uneventful and didn't cause much change in them. And like, it's just more of the same as we saw in Bands of Mourning at the end. I think that's in a way the point, that like now that the set has finally reached like critical mass or whatever and is enacting their plans, now they need to act again and need to get out of that trot that they got into over the 6 years, maybe. But I can definitely see where you're coming from, that they do feel very much the same as they did in the last book.
I'll have to disagree, because I do feel like they all grew, and like Marvin said, they grew into their own role. And you do see it in certain scenes, like when they are waiting outside of the journalist's office and Wayne is joking around like Wayne does about, or like Wayne did, about going to break in, and then they can just blame it on him and stuff. And then Maricy's like, no, don't do that. And then instead of like fighting back like Wayne would have done, he just said, okay. And then he goes and gets some street food, chowta.
I think
so you do see the growth, I feel, and it is sprinkled in the scenes. So I didn't have a problem with the time gap or how the characters felt afterwards.
out of all of them, I think Wayne was the one that changed the most. And this was a debate we were having the other day on the server of like how some people felt that it made no sense for Wayne to do such a 180 on his feelings like about himself. And I was like, it's been 6 years. And in that time, Wayne has gotten over Annette and is actually her friend now with Jaxie. And like those two have helped him a lot in his growth. He's been a constable for 6 years with Marasi, which has also helped him with that. And they finally called him out on like all the problems people kept bringing up with him over the last 3 books. Wayne has changed the most. The other ones do feel more similar to how they were in bands. But there are these subtle changes in the way they view themselves and their relationships to other people. I mean, Wax with the senator thing, and like Steris has come more into her own, which is completed in this book. And Marasi's also more confident than like, I am this constable. I mean, and she's really confident in herself, but she wasn't so much at the beginning. And like the changes aren't ginormous, but there are traces of it there. Except in Wayne's case, Wayne did change a lot. And I was worried about that at the beginning of the book when he made that joke to Marathi, like from the preview chapters. I was like, don't tell me, Brandon, that Wayne hasn't learned a thing in 6 years. and then it was like, okay, no, he actually has learned. He was just making a joke and fine.
Messing around with Marcy.
I don't know if I'm being clear, but I hope.
No, yeah, that's how I feel as well. I mean, the other 3 books have been focused on the other characters. So of course, this book is Wayne's book, I guess, since it started with, a flashback for him. So it makes sense that this book has the biggest change in Wayne's character to me. So I was happy with it.
I want to know who of you guys, did any of you strongly dislike Wayne, or did you like him? Where were you at before this book with Wayne? Because he's a controversial character. People have different opinions. I'm just curious where everybody was coming from and how this book changed that for you, or if it did.
I didn't really like Wayne's humor, which is a very common feeling, I think. He's very overdoes it. And I do understand that that's his character and that's how he's dealing with his trauma and that's just how his brain works. But I just didn't enjoy reading it. And there were a lot of parts in this book that I did not enjoy reading Wayne wise. The constant poop jokes were eye rolling to me. I did not like those. I thought that this guy is 39 years old or something. I get that people can still have potty humor, but it's okay, we get it. So I really didn't like that. But when Wayne was a little bit more serious, his character had grown. So I appreciated that more. Like the scene where he's getting into the dead, was it a journalist or a photographer or someone? He was getting into that guy's head to kind of figure out how he died and what the people were looking for when they cleaned up his apartment. I really liked that because it really shows Wayne's strengths as a person who can kind of get into another character and does it even better than the Khandra can. So it was nice to see that, and it made me appreciate him more as a character in this book.
So on my first reads through Era 2, I actually found him kind of funny and did a very service level read of him and okay, yeah, he's the funny sidekick and we can laugh at his jokes. But on rereads, I definitely also notice how problematic all the things are, and especially comparing his viewpoints in the earlier books with this one, with Lost Metal now, they still have the same sort of energy, but you can definitely see the change then. They're a lot more melancholy in a way as well. He says he's dead and everything, and that is that he has died, which is in the same, it has the same sort of energy as his Temple of the Common Man thing when he's in that bar, but they read a lot more serious, I guess, and he really, there has been some change in himself there, and that he comes to grips with his own real, because it's very much a facade that he puts on to always be this funny guy and tries to cope with his trauma in that way. And I can definitely see the progression in Lost Metal where he comes to grips with that, and especially at that one point where he opens up to the people to distract them. I think when he talks about how they can
in
be
the sewer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think so. At least
not the, you're talking about at the top of the shot.
Yeah, right at the top of the shot. Yeah, the shore. Yeah. But yeah, I think especially that scene, that was really powerful, and so I think I've come around to at least liking him again, and I think he had a good ending, all things considered. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was never the biggest fan of Wayne. Again, a lot of his humor didn't land for me. I didn't like the way he treated women, the Steris, Ranette, etc. There were things with his character that in the other books I felt had a ton of potential, but that Brandon was kind of ignoring because the funny sidekick character and all that humor thing. And I think that this book while yes, I still have like my problems with Wayne, and he has some like problematic aspects, he's definitely grown since then, and that let me enjoy his POVs and I think his arc a lot more in this book than I had previously. And I think that like this character arc, like this book of like realizing his role and coming to terms with what he did and figuring out better ways to deal with those things, like, okay, I'm not gonna do the visits to Alejandra in person anymore, and all these things made for a really great character arc, and I really liked where he ended. And that doesn't mean Wayne is a person like without flaws. That doesn't mean he's perfect now, but I liked that progression and how he changed in this book, and I think it was really well done. Even if there are some jokes that still had me like rolling my eye. He has some good political burns in the first couple of chapters as well.
I really liked Wayne's character, and I really liked Wayne in this book. I really liked Wayne before this book. I have always found him quite funny, and I have enjoyed reading his banter and like when he comes on screen with other people. I'm also deeply aware of how problematic he is as a person, and my worry before this book has always been whether the problematic aspects of Wayne were deliberately put in to make him a problematic character, or if they were subconsciously added as like people often don't understand that these things can be problematic in real life, and it's like the subconscious bias that can be put into something, particularly when there's humor involved and like trying to make things funny, and it involves like making X person the butt of a joke. And the difference between doing that deliberately to say this character is problematic and not doing it deliberately, it's just that was the problem for me. This book showed that it was deliberate, that like Brandon was well aware of the problems with Wayne and like was going to address them. And I loved the scene in the diner with Renette and her girlfriend. And she's just like, no, Wayne, like you can't keep doing this. You're making this about you. And that is everything that like I wanted in this book for Wayne. Like I just wanted things like that resolved, and I loved how it was done. I really enjoyed Wayne in pretty much all of this book. There was a point in this book that I didn't like with Wayne where there's talk about him burning down a school, and there's just like very little details about it. And I'm like, I don't know if I could just like gloss over that and move on without
an evil school.
any more context.
Yeah, they did mention that it was like a school that even Wax was like, oh no, that was okay.
Yeah. Wax was like, that's cool. They deserve to be burned down. But
we don't know more than that. And that's
right.
That's kind of what I wanted a little bit more of. It's like, okay, cool. You think it should be burnt down, but why? What happened? Anyway, so that was probably like one of the big things that really stood out to me that I didn't like with Wayne. His death scene was fine. It did not really impact me in the way that death scenes for characters I like normally impact me.
Are you serious?
Yeah, no, I think I was kind of expecting it with the way that this book was set up and the focus on Wayne. I'm like, yeah, Wayne's probably gonna die.
Yes.
And yeah, I did enjoy the reversal of like pushing Wax off the boat, and it's like, okay, no, this is my show now. I'm gonna be the one to save the day. And yeah, I did enjoy that, but yeah, I just didn't have the impact that other deaths have had on me. But I really enjoyed Wayne in this book. I think it was really well done.
Speaking of the death scene, I thought it was going to be Marassi at first. I thought there was going to be a repeat, like Well of Ascension thing, where like she took up all the power and then had to use it, and that had its consequences. And then I was like, okay, no, that's not her plan. And then I was like, okay, yeah, Wayne.
I definitely predicted the Wayne death when he started referencing his mom's story as they were traveling to Bilming, or traveling through Bilming, talking about the canyon or cavern or something. That's when I was like, oh, he's the hero. So I didn't predict it in like Lost previews or anything. I know people mentioned, oh, I bet it's Wayne, like in a jokey way. So I was aware of that theory, but I was like, oh, I don't know. I mean, it could be anybody really. It could be Wax or anyone. So I think the Wayne arc here worked really, really well because he's putting himself in this story that his mom told as a character, which is Wayne in a nutshell. And at the end, when he's going to the beyond, he has, a little pun. I did the biggest explosion. It was just like a perfect ending for Wayne, and I couldn't have asked for better.
I think my favorite single moment in the book was the last line where it quotes like his mom's. His mom like reads like says a bit of poetry about the stars and endless things, and like using that line when Wayne. Oh gosh, that got me.
Yeah. I had a little tear in my eye. I was like,
definitely being able to get that after scene after the death, where he's talking to Harmony, like it just adds so much. It's like the other after death scenes that Brandon's done. Like Eshonai is the other one that really jumps to mind for me. It's like it just rounds out and closes out the character so well. I actually forgot to mention, but you brought it up, so I remembered. I actually really disliked the connection to the story that his mom told. Like, it just felt really clunky and really forced to me. I just kind of wished that wasn't there, but everything else he does was there.
I liked it because Wayne has always like in his chapters in previous books, he has these like little like weird like this Wayne quirk where he's like seeing the world in some weird way. Like in Shadows of Self, he's like in the bar, but he's like pretending it's like a church or whatever. So he like does that. And so it was kind of fun for me that like with this being like sort of Wayne's book in a sense, that it was like a thing that spanned the entire book that he was kind of doing that with. And I liked, I guess, how it played into like him being the hero. But
all right. So we talked a lot about Wax. We talked a lot about Wayne. And then earlier we did talk about Steris a bit. But let's kind of pivot into Marasi's plot line. She had some interesting things with the Ghostbloods, of course, but we also have her struggle against these incoming forces. Does anybody have thoughts about her plot line?
I have thoughts about the incoming forces. I am convinced, absolutely convinced, that they are the Iriali. Just the description that was given for what they look like, it sounds exactly like the Iriali, and I will fight people on this.
So how do you think that the Iriali like factor into autonomy's plans?
Yeah, that's what
It's
I'm
really
curious
interesting
about.
because like I think up to this point, at least I've always thought of the Iriali as one group that stays as one group. But what if they're not actually one group that stays as one group? They're one group that has split into different groups, which is fairly common with the way society is kind of set up, right? And countries are set up. And I could see this being like a section of the Iriali, or maybe just, I don't know. This is after Soulmlight 5, so Odium has Iri as an ally on Rosha for their conflict, so he very much could be like, I don't know, loaning them out to autonomy or something. But
Odium
I don't know. I'm
has to
just
be involved
convinced
somehow.
that it is the Iri, the Iriali.
something about their description made me skeptical of that. And I can't pin quite what it was. It could be. I just kind of am stuck in this. Who knows?
Judging by their red eyes, at least, I think it's like, I wouldn't be surprised if they're not there willingly. Like they are controlled by autonomy, but I could definitely see being the reality with like the metallic golden skin. I mean, it's the first thing you sort of, I at least went to like, okay, it might be the reality because those are people that we have fitting this description, because I don't think it's like Keenspren or whatever. Like, like I don't think it's that. So I'm at least sort of opposed to the idea of them being a reality, somehow being controlled, or maybe even on board with autonomy.
Like, I do agree that it's likely that they're the reality, but I think there's something else going on that we don't know about. Maybe Odium, maybe more with autonomy. There's something else, because they have been described as like aloof and with all these beliefs, but I couldn't, like before this, I would have never imagined that they would go to these lengths. I can't put my finger on it, but there has to be something else going on with them. And I'm really, really curious to find what that's about and like to learn more about their reality culture and their people and this thing that they have with the lands and the places they've traveled. See how like the reality present in different moments we encounter them.
I just want to like, because I had to go back to the book and read their description. So this is really close to the end. It's like, I don't know what chapter it is, but this is when Marcy's down at the pool and she can see them. It says, thousands of inhuman soldiers with golden skin and glowing red eyes, living statues. They carried rifles of an advanced design, and their stares seemed to bore holes in her mind. The men of gold and red had arrived, bearers of the final metal, Miles had called them, destroyers.
I think for me, it was the description of being inhuman and the way that they're described as like, what was the word? Statues or
Living statues.
They just like feel like not quite human. And maybe that's because they're like, there's some kind of like, they've got the red eyes, you know, maybe it's some kind of like mind control thing. They're, you know, their irreality that have been like mentally taken over or something. I don't know, but.
And bearers of the final metal.
What's that supposed to be?
What is the final? Which metal? Which is it lost?
Is this the lost metal?
Yeah, it doesn't really answer any of that about like what that is or what Miles or any of those people who had those. I don't know what they were, like death rattles.
Yeah. It is frustrating that like Maritime's been following this mystery of the men of gold and red since the first book, and she doesn't actually get any answers to it. Like it's just not being resolved.
So I have issues with her ending, or like that, and the ending to that plot in general, because it just felt quite anticlimactic to me. Like they deal with Enthroned, and then they just do a repeat of Hero of Ages, basically, where they burn away all the investiture there, and it just stops. Like, at least one or two of the, like, I don't know, have one or two of the men of gold and red come through or whatever, and like have them deal with that. Because it feels quite weird to me that also autonomy would just be fine. Okay, they've stopped the close the perpendicularity, and then she just orders her army to pick off in Shadesmar and like leave. That, I don't know. It feels very weird to me.
And for Marcy being a detective, she sure doesn't ask a lot of questions of the Ghostbloods. Like, that's the first thing I would have been like, who are these people? Like, why are they coming here? You know, I know that they told her that they won't share the secrets or anything, but she's not asking the questions that us, the readers, are asking. And it was really frustrating. I think her storyline was, for me, the most frustrating to read, because it was nice to get a little bit of closure on some previous plot lines, but then we have this brand new one and it doesn't get any anything to end it.
And I think the difficulty with this book, and it is a bit of a problem for me, and it ties into the end of Maricide's story, is like all of this is just being set up for Era 3. So we can't resolve these things because we have to set them up for the next book. And I personally really dislike when books do that, because it is like underwhelming and disappointing, and I wanted a conclusion. But yeah, I feel like that's the problem with kind of the end of this book is just things just aren't resolved. Things aren't finished because we need to take them to the next one.
Another thing that I found kind of frustrating that wasn't resolved, and that's something that I was expecting to be resolved in this book, was discord, which we knew from Era 1 was a possibility that Harmony, you know, Seiza taking up 2 shards could have become. And we're seeing this shadowy figure behind him in a few scenes in this book. And it was a little frustrating that this was brought up and nothing was, I mean, Kelsier at the very end kind of, it's like, what about that thing? You know, they didn't even really acknowledge it. So why mention that he has this shadowy, ominous figure behind Harmony if it's not even going to be a plot point in the book?
I think it's all Era 3 setup. I think like it's like
same.
Because we need it for Era 3.
Yeah.
In terms of the Discord thing, someone actually pointed out on a YouTube comment, I think, that the epigraph in the Final Empire that Discord comes up is also the first chapter that Caesar is ever introduced in.
Yes.
Yeah, this is gonna be one of my questions for the spoiler stream now in December. Because that made me really curious. And I am not sure how to phrase any of the other questions that I have about the ethers, and I think Brandon is gonna be cagey about them, so I think this is the thing that's most likely to get any answers. And Putty's also going to ask about the ethers a ton, so this is going to be my question. I am very curious to see if this was intentional, if it was like kind of like in the top room level foreshadowing.
Like, that is too much of a coincidence. Like, it has to be intentional.
The way he plotted the entirety of Era 1, like, all the way through and everything, like, I don't see where
it's like, man, in 20 years, their minds are going to be blown.
Yeah. It's like, if he knew that Caesar was going to be the hero of ages and pick up the shards and become Harmony, and he already had planned for this idea of discord and harmony, then he had to have done it deliberately. Yeah. Like, he would have known, like, when writing Era 1, that would be where it ends up.
So Harmony in this book and in other Era 2 books was very frustrated, and we feel very frustrated as readers to read how his hands are tied, basically, because of his opposite natures. With discord in this book, they kind of mentioned, I think it was one of the characters mentioned to Harmony that you're like losing control or losing...
I think it's Kelsier who says,
I don't have this in notes.
Yeah, it would be Kelsier.
Like he's kind of not as stable as he could be, and this shadow is looming behind him as this ominous threat of discord. And what do you guys think that discord itself is? How is Harmony different if he becomes discord?
Oh man. Okay, I don't want to get into my thoughts on Harmony necessarily, but I think that Discord, he's not going to care what the ramifications of any action is. And it's going to be chaos. And that's what I think Discord is compared to Harmony. And I'm really interested to see the conflict between Caesar and Kelsier in that case. Because I know Eric and a lot of people have seen it as, this is set up for Caesar as Discord versus Kelsier. But I was thinking before, Kelsier wants Caesar to do more stuff. So if he turns him to Discord and does more stuff, then maybe Kelsier is actually going to utilize Discord instead of like be in opposition to him.
I've seen a lot of people seem to think that like Harmony is like more preservation-y and that Discord will be more ruinous. I'm not sure that I think that. I think that as Discord, I'm imagining that he is going to like fluctuate to the extremes of those two shards more. And so I think that he will be very erratic, and which I think is, I like, because I think that's so terrifying that, that you're going to like see him, in one scene and he's going to be behaving one way, and then in the next scene he's going to be behaving a very different way. And I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. And I think that on one hand, like Kelsier may at the beginning, like be able to use that. Then he's going to realize just the danger that this is to Scadrial, and that's going to lead to Eric's theory, which I am sad to say I agree with, because it's a very sad and depressing theory, but it makes sense in my mind, at least, that possibly Kelsier is going to have to take one for the team and say that you aren't stable anymore, and somehow like remove him from that position or find a way to fix it.
Chaos thinks that that Kelsier is going to kill Caesar. And I don't know what's going to happen after that, but that's definitely what Eric thinks. And like, I can see the conflict that's being set up there. Like, it does seem like Era 3 is going to be this conflict between Kelsier and Caesar, because they are not on the same terms at the moment and are very much lying to each other.
In Secret History and in The Lost Metal, Kelsier mentions to Caesar his skills at lying or hiding the truth from him. So I was wondering if maybe because this is a bridge from Era 1 to Era 3. If maybe the whole plot line with separating Harmonium into its component parts or trying to get Adium and Lerasium from it, if that might play into Sazed's transformation from harmony into discord. So maybe the fact that he's kind of hiding the fact that he did actually produce Lerasium, that Wax did, from Kelsier might be a ploy of Discord's to kind of keep the upper hand when it comes to making new Mistborn.
Everybody's absorbing that. Yeah.
I was just thinking, I didn't know exactly how the presence of god metals affects the actual shard. So like if there's more Adium in the world than there is Lerasium or vice versa, if that could throw harmony out of his perfect alignment.
It definitely seems plausible from like, I don't know, just the way that we saw with what we saw with Ruin and Atium and Era 1 and the whole point of like preservation, like putting some of that power into Atium. So I could see something there. It's like, I can't see it with like one, like with the experiment Wax did was like so little, like I can't imagine that mattered at all. So I'm curious, I guess, if they'll kind of ramp up and start doing more of these experiments. I'm wondering where they're going to get Trellium. Maybe there's like some stash of Trellium on the planet still, but like if Autonomy is like booking it for now and coming back later, I don't know where they get Trellium to.
Well, the set has Trellium, and if the set is destroyed because Telsin's gone,
they'll find
maybe they can just find their stash.
Era 1 was about finding the Atium stash, and Era 3 is about finding the Trellium stash.
Era 4 is going to be about finding the Adenalcium Mumium.
We seem to be kind of winding down on things. Did anybody have any other thoughts or comments they wanted to make before we go into like our what's your favorite scene kind of segment?
I don't know. I'm just very excited for Era 3 and what that's going to bring in the future of the Cosmere in general, because this set up so much and the gloves are finally off. And in my opinion, they've been loose at the very least for some time, and Brandon just finally admitted it. Though this is at a whole other level, but Brandon was starting to cross that line in Words of Radiance, Oathbringer, Rhythm of War, with some of the cameos there. But the gloves are finally off, and it's going to be so exciting. Next year is going to be very exciting with everything we have going on, even if it's going to be a bit too much. I'm really looking forward to see what's coming.
Definitely.
Same.
So I just want to go around and maybe everybody can kind of say like their favorite scene from the book, if you'd like. I'll start with Marvin. I'll just go in order.
So my favorite scene would probably have to be when they meet Marsh, or like Death, because like he puts on this entire show of like, oh, I am Death, and like he scares away the other people there. And meanwhile, like as soon as they're gone, he's like deflates, and like also how with every breath his like wrinkles come back and recede again. I feel like that's very striking, and it's sort of that he has grown into this role of Death, but still somehow is that guy from a couple 100 years ago. It's very fun to see, and like I don't know, I like that we have some more Marsh at all, and I really like the scene like as in general, like how it was put on. Yeah.
Man, now that I think about it, like there really is a lot of stuff in this book.
Yep.
that we didn't even talk about.
Yeah.
Crazy. Joshua.
So I think my favorite maybe was that I already mentioned with like Wayne's little conclusion there. So I'm going to go with, I guess maybe this is actually even more my favorite, but the entirety of chapters 39 and 40.
Same.
Like just like going into the Ghostbloods headquarters, meeting all these people, seeing this, like it's just somebody described it as a Cosmere fever dream, and like that's just the most apt term for everything that happens there is just wild, so much fun. So that I'll say that. I do have to say honorable mention also though to when Wax is like fighting his way up the tower, and he like says to Harmony like, you know, you don't know what this is like, and Sazed like sends him that little image of from the Battle of Luthadel. That was another like kind of really special tiny moment for me.
Jessie.
Things already being said. So my actual top moment is definitely Marsh cosplaying himself as Death. Like that was just incredible, and I loved it so much. And yeah, like probably the other two that jump out to me, besides like the Ghostbloods stuff, because yeah, that really is its own category of wait, are we actually going to? Is Kelsey actually going to be in this book? What the hell? It is like the one that Josh mentioned with Wax getting the little vision from Harmony, because that was so good. And Wayne's talk with Renette. Like those are my top scenes by far.
Very, very good ones. Veronica.
Yeah, other than the entirety of chapter 39 and 40, obviously a lot of people are going to choose that. I really liked seeing Tussle and like the whole like ether stuff, because I have read Ether of Night and I love that book. It has its problems structurally. But I love the characters in the magic system, and just seeing it finally be canon made me so excited.
And the scene where it turns into this juggernaut, I feel like
such a good moment.
Yeah, it was.
Have to shout out him turning into a rock goblin thing with
so
like
fun.
the Aether, because that was so cool.
Yeah. It is so much fun. Also, honorable mention to be just going completely crazy when Melan casually mentioned that her guide is a showdown.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah.
There's so much in this book.
That was like at the very end, and you're like, oh, it's winding down. It's like, whoa. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Really exciting.
Like, if we didn't have the secret projects next year, we'd have so many topics to talk about just with this book alone.
Oh, yes. Shardcast is going to be full.
Yep.
I knew since I was going last that all of my scenes, every single scene would be taken. So I'll just mention there's two. And these two are the ones that solidified in my mind that Era 2 is the best series that should be turned into a movie. And that is Wax dropping out of nowhere in the middle of the gunfight and like stopping bullets and like sending them and shooting into all the other people. Like so cinematic. I could just see it in my mind. Like super, super fun. And then also Twin Soul becoming this big rock golem thing and saying his speech and everything.
Yeah.
That just like after that scene, I said, you know what? Twin Soul is my favorite character from this book right now.
Yep.
So those are two scenes that just in my mind stand out to me as like, maybe because I'm kind of artistically minded. Those are the scenes that really stood out to me because I could just picture every single frame in my mind. So super fun book. All right. So we're going to bring this to a close with some last final thoughts, if we have any. Marvin, would you like to start?
I mean, there's so many thoughts after this book, because as we're talking, I'm like, we haven't even talked about this and that, but we will have separate episodes for this. I mean, just like all the Cosmere stuff was just so fantastic in this book. As Veronica brought up the show tell, even at the end, like there's not much to talk about there because they just make an appearance, but still that we have it is fantastic. Or like, who are the people that Milan is visiting? So I think we will have more to talk about with this book, and like I'm excited to see for one where Era 3 is going, and in general, like when we will have answers to all these questions that I guess just the epilogues like answer or asked of us. So yeah.
And Joshua?
Yeah, not much else to add other than just excitement for not just Mistborn Era 3, but the Cosmere in general. Just seeing, you know, where Brandon is making a turn here with things is exciting. So
Jessie.
I would really like to see. There is a small reference in one of the epilogues of Marasai offering to help find Moonlight and bring her back. And I would really like that novella or whatever. That would be great. Please, 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 please.
I completely agree. Moonlight was a really, really cool character, especially when she did her little transformation with her stamp. And we see basically an Elantrian like out in the wild.
Yeah.
Thank you. You just reminded me of what I wanted to say.
Super cool. Veronica, now it's your turn. You can talk.
So I've been insisting for a very long time that the Elantrians, if they're on their home court, they will beat practically any other investiture user in the Cosmere. And people have never believed me. And now we have proof. Like what Shai did. And like even though if we don't see it on screen, and the fact that now they aren't so limited by location and direct access to Elantris. It's just the Cellish systems are so versatile in what they can do that they can be really, really powerful. And people always forget about them because we have more flashy systems like the Knights Radiant and Stormlight and all that, and Allomancy. Because they're very cinematic, and we only have one book in Elantris compared to, 7 now for Mistborn, or 4 ginormous books for Stormlight. And so I am very happy that my point on dealing on the Cellish systems was vindicated in this book. And I really want those Elantris sequels, other than that novella that Jessie mentioned.
Brandon has I've always imagined that Elantris 2, the Elantris sequel, would be not long after the events of Elantris, and now I'm almost wondering is it possible that that KI's as code names goes back to Cell and reunites with her brother, and it's that would be amazing.
That'd be very.
I love that idea. I love that idea so much.
After reading The Lost Metal and after actually being able to go to Dragonsteel Con and listening to Brandon just go all out with the Cosmere and say that, now the gloves are off. That was such a huge moment. It just makes me so excited for what's coming up. It feels like all of the books, every book that has been put out so far is leading up to this perfect huge story, and it's just really exciting to see. And The Lost Metal is a perfect example of how crazy it'll get with all of these different magic systems and all of these different characters and personalities, shards, planets. It's just this huge war in my mind of things going on, and it's just really, really exciting to be a part of as a fan. Okie dokie. Let's move on to who's that Cosmere character? And Eric has written down for me a song to sing for you. It goes do 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 do. All right.
Nailed it.
This character is from Roshar.
Menace. Tien.
Tom.
Raise.
Void in drag on a horse. It's time for Who's That Cosmere Character? Caw.
All right, you know how the game is played. You send 5 clues and a character to wtcc at 17thshard.com. I'll read the clues aloud, and after each clue, my fine panelists have a chance to guess who's that Cosmere character. It is my first time hosting this, and I've only participated 2 or 3 times in past Shardcasts, so bear with me. Also, I have to mention we've gotten a lot of spam in our WTCC inbox, and so that's why it's been kind of difficult to get to them, but hopefully we're going to get to yours eventually. All right, so for the first one, this comes from Basement Boy, BOI, on the forums. Clue number 1. This character is from Roshar.
Why did I guess it?
Gaz.
Yaddle.
It is not Gaz. It is not Yaddle.
Oh, she's not from Roshar.
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
on Roshar, but she's not from Roshar.
You want to do
I
that?
had her on my mind because of...
Hesina.
It is not Tessina.
Let's clear out both of the parents, Liren.
It is not Liren. Okay, moving on to clue number 2. This character is invested.
Leshwi.
It is not Leshwi.
Raboniel.
Not Ravoniel.
Lesian.
Or Lesian. It is not Lesian either.
Zeth.
It is not Seth. Ooh. Clue 3. This character is male.
Dalinar.
It is not Dalinar.
Axes.
It is not Axes.
Really nice one. I'm gonna get another low-hanging fruit out of the way. Kaladin.
It is not Kaladin.
Kalak, the Herald.
Not Kalak. All right. Clue number 4. This character is smarter than they let people think.
Oh.
Renarin.
It is not Renarin.
That is not,
David.
but they're not from the Cosmere, so.
I don't know if you heard me, but I said David.
It is not David.
Elaine.
Not Relaine.
This
is a tough one.
Okay, let me see. Smarter than...
The clues have been very general so far.
They have,
so.
yes. And according to Basement Boy on the forums, these are bugging everybody on purpose.
Yeah, I assume so.
Written specifically to cause
I'm trying to
frustration,
think.
maximum frustration.
Of that one, like, what's the name? The baker, whatever, who rides with Yasna?
I don't remember their name.
That guy. Yeah,
It is not the baker who rides with Yasna.
Okay, thanks.
At least as far as I know. Okay. Clue number 5. This character was on the Wander Sail.
Oh.
Oh,
That takes away my
Darethil?
clue.
It is not Darethil.
Logan's
Oh my god, what's
cousin.
his name? Huyo.
Yeah.
The other wonders.
It was Huyo. I don't know
Cheyenne
how to
gets
pronounce
that.
it.
Yeah, I forgot his
It
name.
was.
I also the point for that one.
Who got it? Which one of you got it first?
Cheyenne
was
got
it?
the name.
Huyo started
it was
saying
Veronica.
Lopen's
Yeah, it was-
cousin first, and
All
then I was
right.
like,
1 gold star to Veronica for guessing
We can share
on
that
clue
point.
5. Okay, half a gold star to Veronica and half a gold star to Paleo. Here you go.
that is a quick one though for your characters up
Yeah,
to clue
well, that's
5.
a lot of
That
a
was
lot of
quick.
characters it could have been. Okay, who's that Cosmere character number 2? This one sent in by Hunterfish. Clue number 1. This character has multiple names.
Telsier.
Jessie, you get a gold star because it was Kelsier.
Okay, what were the other clues?
Excellent.
okay.
The other clues. Clue 2. This character is a Stormlight character. Clue 3. This character is known for his philanthropy. Clue 4. This character impacts at least 2 planets in the Cosmere.
Oh, mm-hmm. Yeah.
And clue 5. This character has a drawing of a flower.
That would have been tough
Could
until
it
5.
be? Yeah. Good job, Jessie. That was
Just like the first thing that
impressive.
came to mind. It's like, Kelsier, Sidecar. Yeah.
Good one. All right, man, this is going really fast. Who's that Cosmere character? Number 3. Now, this one is by Jester Lavore.
Yo,
This
Jester.
is for our this is for our from our Patreon priority queue. If you are a herald, you can submit it to our priority queue, and your clues will be read much faster.
Also,
little
thank you to Jester for the new overlay because it's really cool.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Really appreciate it.
It was nice meeting you at Ringsteel.
It was.
Yeah.
Clue number 1. I am not mad, but afraid.
Calic?
It is not Calic.
Like, are these actually Are these quotes from the book, or are these just clues written in this way?
These are the clues that Jester Lavore has submitted.
Say it
Shalon.
again.
It is not Shalon. I am not mad, but afraid.
I don't want to guess a Stormlight character. That's what it is.
Say that.
It is not Sazed. That's a good one, though.
Seth, I guess. I don't know.
It is not Seth. Clue number 2. Remember, what power I have outside is a mere candle's light in here.
Is that Hoyd?
It is not Hoyd.
These are some really interesting clues, though.
Yeah.
Vasher.
It is not Vasher.
Like, the way that is phrased makes me think it has something to do like with Shadesmar or whatever. That's like candles, light.
Yeah.
It's a tricky one.
Yeah.
This is why I'm so bad at who's that Cosmere character. Because as soon as I am supposed to guess, every name goes out of my head.
Not even any idea who like this might be as a character. Could you read the second clue?
Remember, what power I have outside is a mere candle's light in here.
Hoyd?
Jessie already guessed.
I already guessed Hoyd.
Yeah.
I genuinely have no idea who this could be.
I'm pretty certain that's a quote, and I just can't quite place.
Yeah, I know. Same.
Are we waiting on just Marvin's?
Yes. I'm going to pass on this clue. Like, I have
Just
no
say a
idea.
name, any name.
Yeah, but I want the name to at least fit the clues.
Okay, if you pass, you pass.
I pass, yeah.
Okay, clue number 3. They've forgiven us.
Oh,
Leshwi.
Leshwi.
Yeah.
Joshua, you get a gold star. These were really good ones. Clue number 4 would have been, I couldn't have talked us out of this. He knows what we did. And then clue 5 would have been, my soul is too long owned by someone else for that.
see, if they'd put they've
Yeah, I think
forgiven
the
us
third
at the
clue-
end,
yeah.
we would have been baffled the whole way through.
What is what's the
Because
first
they've
one?
forgiven us is a
The first
giveaway.
one was, I am not mad, but afraid.
Yeah, I couldn't have got that. The second one, I think, is when they go into Erythru with the when the suppression is still active.
Right.
I think.
Right, yeah, that makes sense.
It's a good one.
We should have guessed some
He
views
did
at the
have a
beginning.
request for voice acting,
Very
so I
much
tried my
is
best.
a quote. They all are. I just searched the first one. It's from Rhythm of War, chapter 14.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
clues. I
Yeah,
like
that's
that
really
one.
I'll just
Yeah,
read the
yeah,
little
yeah.
fragment.
All right.
Why did you seek to block my proposal, Leshwi? Ravoniel asked. Have you begun to feel the effects of madness? I am not mad, but afraid, Leshwi said to abashment, and Venli started at the words. Lady Leshwi, afraid? Do you truly think you can end the war?
That was
That's
a good one because
really
it makes you
cool.
think of mad, like angry. And so you're trying to think of like characters.
I was definitely thinking mad as in like Herald mad.
crazy.
I was like, this does not fit any of the heralds.
Nice one. Thank you very much for submitting your clues and your characters. Always super fun. All right. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Next up, we'll have our episode on Trell and autonomy this weekend, and followed by a third reactions video, and then more topics afterwards. And of course, you can always find us on 17thshard.com for all your news, discussions, theories, and more fun than you can ever want. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, and iTunes. And please subscribe on YouTube. Support us on our Patreon for as little as $1. We will see you next time.
Bye.
And I have a note here. Eric says I have to say caw or he's going to fire me.
Great.
Well, go on.
Caw.
Oh,
Fantastic.
10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Phil for admin.
Fell for admin, yeah.
Yes.
Hashtag fell for admin.
Hashtag fell for admin.